Grace and peace be multiplied unto you. I welcome you to today's lesson in science on the continuation of the topic ecosystem. So, previously in our last week lesson, we learned about what ecosystem is. We learned about the biotic and the abiotic factors. We also looked at the interactions with biotic components, carbon cycle, and the rest. So, let's quickly go through the interactions with the biotic components again. So interactions with biotic components in the ecosystem can be seen in the rank of food consumption in the organism, which is called food chain. So there is an interaction between the living aspect and then the non-living aspect in the ecosystem, and then in this it involves the consumption of organisms. So consumption of organisms is what we call food chain. And food chain is a community of organisms where each member is eaten in turn by another member. So for example, the fact that frog can eat ants, and then let's say snake can eat frog, and then eagle or a bird can eat snake, that is what we call food chain, because these organisms are eaten by each other. For example, plants are eaten by herbivores, then the herbivores are eaten by the first carnivores, which are finally eaten by other carnivores. So that is what we call food chain. In the end, all producers and consumers will die and they will be decomposed by decomposers. The plants will use the decomposed material as nutrients for their growth. If an ecosystem has several related food chains, those food chains will form food web. So food web simply is a group of food chains. So it's a group of food chains that are linked together. That is what we call food web. So in food web, one consumer can have more than one role. For example, the role as a first level consumer and also a second level consumer. In food chain, energy in food can be transferred from one organism to another, but the energy transferred is only a small amount. In food chain, some of the energy is utilized for growth, some is excreted as residue, and some is released as heat. Only 10% of energy is stored inside the body of an organism. So what it's saying is that in food chain, usually the energy gotten from food is not all used to build up the body, because some of them will be converted to waste materials, and others only, so it is only 10% of that energy that is stored in the body of an organism. This 1/10 energy is available for the organism, which becomes a predator. The 90% reduction of energy at every trophic level is the answer to the question, why are there more plants compared to herbivores and more herbivores compared to carnivores? In other words, in order for a food chain to last, the number of producers have to be higher than the number of first level consumers. The number of first consumers have to be higher than the second consumers, and so on. So basically, in every food chain or in every ecosystem, if that ecosystem is supposed to last, then the producers, example, the plants, are supposed to be more than the animals that feed on plants. And then the higher animals or second level consumers, which feed on the animals that feed on plants, needs to be fewer than the plants. So if, for example, we have, these are plants, okay, so plants needs to be a lot than the animals that feed on plants, okay, and those that feed on this animals should be also small. So that is the direction in which it goes. So if these are plants, then the animals that feed on plants should be quite smaller than those that than the plants, so that they will have enough food to feed on. And then these ones too should be smaller than this, so that they can have enough food to feed on. So this is a picture of food chain. Food chain shows a community of organisms where each member is eaten in turn by another member. So you realize that plant is eaten by herbivores, like example antelope, and antelopes are eaten by wolves or lions, and then these wolves die off, and then their organic material, waste organic materials, together with the sunlight, trials together with the sunlight, provide energy for plants to grow. So that is how it all happens in the food chain. So like I said, food web is a series of food chain coming together. So these food web is multiple food chains, in short, multiple food chains. So when you look at this example here, you realize that grasshopper feeds on plants, a rat will eat grasshopper, and then a fox will eat the rat, and then the rat the fox can also eat insects. The fox can eat a rabbit or a squirrel. The squirrel will eat food from the plant. The Also, so you can make a lot of linkages here, because you realize that so many things eat each other for survival. Okay, so food pyramid simply shows you the rank of animals when it talks about the predators. So we have this one being the most, because this is what we call the producers. The plants are the producers, and this is the first level consumer, because these animals feed directly on the producers, and this is the second level consumer, and they feed directly here. Okay, so interaction with biotic components can occur in several forms. We have, so the first form it can occur in is what we call symbiosis. Symbiosis. It's what we call symbiosis. Symbiosis is a close relationship between two different type of organisms. So a close relationship between two different type of organisms is what we call symbiosis. So symbiosis is classified into three. We have the first one being mutualism, the second one being commensalism, and the third one being parasitism. So comes from the word parasites. Okay, so mutualism is the association that benefits all participants. So let's take it as if you have a friend, two friends that benefit from each other. We say that they have a mutualistic relationship, because let's say if I have a pencil, I give my pencil to you. If you have a pen, you give me your pen. So we are in a mutualistic relationship. So sometimes animals in the ecosystem behave in a mutualistic way where they benefit from each other. Example, a wasp and a flower. So the flower gives nectar to the wasp, and the wasp pollinates the flower. Commensalism. Commensalism is an association of organisms of different types where one organism gains benefits without causing loss to the other. So there are other associations where two organisms of different types come together and one benefits but doesn't cause any harm. So the person just benefits but doesn't cause any problem to his or her partner. And this is what we call commensalism. Okay. And then parasitism is the association between two organisms of different species where one organism gains benefit and the other suffers a loss. So this is also an example for where you realize that there are two friends, one person gains, and as he gains, he is causing harm to the other, and that is what we call parasitism. Parasitism is a negative type of association. Okay, so it is between two organisms of different species where one gains benefit and the other suffers a loss. So example of parasitism is the association between bacteria and the human body. So these are pictures of mutualistic symbiosis, a butterfly and a flower, and a moss plant and a tree. This is an example of a parasitism symbiosis. You realize that the parasites here benefit by drawing blood. This is a tick. It draws blood from the person. It draws blood, but then the person loses blood. So this is a negative type of symbiosis or interaction. Competition. So the next type of interaction aside from symbiosis is competition. So there are organisms in the ecosystem which compete with each other to gain things they need to survive. Example, competition between zebra, horse, buffalo, and deer to obtain grass in the savanna ecosystem. So competition is another interaction where organisms try to survive based on the limited amount of food available. Predation. Predation is the association between the eater and the eaten. So we have what we call the prey and then the predator. So the association between the prey and the predator is what we call predation, where the predator eats the prey. So the association between a deer and a lion, because a lion feeds on a deer, is predation. Antibiotic. Antibiotic is the association of two organisms where one organism resists the growth of the other. Example, the association between penicillin and a pathogenic bacteria. So in this type of relationship, you realize that one of them would not make the other grow well. It resists the growth of the other. So if there are two friends and then one person is always drawing, benefit, and the other one is resisting the growth, it doesn't make the other one person or the other organism grow. It's called antibiotic relationship. So this is an example of a competition where you realize that the foods are limited and then the animals compete for the food. This is an example of predation where you can clearly see a lion being eaten. Sorry, you can clearly see a buffalo being eaten by a lion. And antibiosis, like I said, so it's actually is an interaction where organisms that is harmful to one or prevents the growth of the other. And then neutral relationship, this is where the two organisms do not harm each other, they just live together in harmony. So let's look at this material cycle and energy flow. Material cycle is a continuous cycle of material from abiotic component to a biotic one and then comes back to the biotic one. Material cycle starts from abiotic components, for example, the water and mineral cycles. On land ecosystem, materials such as water and minerals from the ground go through plant's body. Then the plants transform the water and the minerals into different substances such as glucose, protein, and fat, which is consumed by herbivores, to biotic components and then going back to abiotic components. Then the herbivores are eaten by carnivores. Finally, plants, herbivores, and carnivores are decomposed by the decomposers. The materials in those bodies are transformed into water and nutrients, which then return into the soil. The materials will keep cycling from abiotic components. So basically, what it says is that in the ecosystem, it is a cycle where minerals or materials coming from the non-living side of the ecosystem end up into the living side and then back to the non-living side. So for example, minerals and nutrients coming from plants will end up being taken in by living things, and then living things will die, and then decomposers will break them down back into the soil, and then the plants will now use them and then they will also be eaten again by the animals. So it's a cycle that never stops. Okay, so this brings us to the end of our lesson in ecosystem. I hope you've learned much, and I hope this lesson would help you answer the questions I've given to you. Until our next lesson, stay safe and enjoy your day. Bye.